Dave, am I allowed to say welcome back?
No.
It's kind of like a renewing in a way. It's almost like we're starting from the beginning with this new format.
Yes.
A format of no guests, but you and me talking to each other.
Yes, and I know there's wild anticipation.
There
for
is.
What's coming, because we've been like slowly seeding, slowly telling people there's something coming, and we knew we didn't even know what it was going to be.
We could pretend that we did.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like after a couple hundred at least interviews of thought leaders, you and I have been talking a lot about how we've built our businesses with very minimal marketing dollars,
Yes.
but with maximum efforts in building a position of thought leadership, and something that neither of us knew we were doing, but we were doing in the exact same way. So, Dave, why don't you tell our audience what we have chosen to do with this knowledge that we've collected over the last 2 decades?
Well, before we do that, I think maybe there's something else to talk about. And
My
that's
hat?
no, no, I love your hat. Oh, you
okay,
took the hat off.
Off?
Off or on? Well, you know what? People can comment below whether they like hat on or off, right?
I just got a haircut because I'm finally
I think it
covering
looks
the grips.
sharp. I think it looks sharp.
Anyway, hats off. Good
Okay.
for you, Dave.
No, but the interesting thing is, what we've both been hearing, you as a storyteller, a filmmaker, me as a coach, is we're running across a lot of, kind of small to medium-sized businesses that are really curious about telling their story more effectively and becoming a thought leader in their market. And, when we started hearing these and seeing some of the work we're doing, and actually a lot of, I've been watching what you've been doing, and ironically,
And I read your stuff too, Dave.
I've been doing some stuff as well. And then when we got together, we realized, to your earlier question, there's actually a 4-point process.
Yeah, there's a formula that we've been...
Exactly. And the way we got about, and the way we came about it has been really maybe intuitive, but, in retrospect, there's a lot of similar disciplines that we're both applying.
Yeah, and I think it's...
That we want to share.
We definitely want to
That
share
we
it.
have been sharing.
And it's really interesting too that it took 200 interviews with other thought leaders for us to realize, what, we've built our own position of thought leadership in our businesses, in Vision Coaching and in Hemmings House,
Yeah.
the exact same way. I mentioned that earlier. It's like we didn't plan on that. You and I have known each other for a long time, and we've kind of grown our businesses at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But we won't go into in this moment what the formula is because we've got a few other things to talk about first. But you and I have followed the exact same method for at least a decade, and it's worked.
Mm-hmm.
And for our loyal listeners and other people who have opted in to this free resource, which is this conversation of you and I exploring the 4-point boiling point process of thought leadership, we want to share this as a inspiration, as a thank you for all the people that have listened, for all the people as well who are watching this, not listening. We've got cameras here. For all of you who have come and spoken to Dave and I over the years about saying things like, how do you guys do this? How do you have the time to put all this effort into making the podcast and all the other bits of content marketing that you guys do to claim our space in the market?
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to share this information with you now.
Yeah, well, but what I'd like to do is, why don't we, it'd be kind of interesting just to back up a little bit, right? So what we have in common is we both began businesses about the same time, within the same year, 18-month period.
Yep.
And we both have businesses that are similar in that it's kind of, we're offering service that's a little intangible. It's like it's not a widget of some sort that fits into a particular system or anything like that.
I want to remind people what Vision Coaching is.
Yeah, so we do leadership coaching. We offer coaching services. It's a little nebulous. And when I got into the marketplace, over a decade ago, and we're going to define market, we're going to define thought leader later, but there's this idea that no one even knew really what coaching was.
I didn't. Remember the first conversation I had with you on that trade mission where I met you?
Yes.
You said that you're looking at leaving your job to start a coaching business. And I was like, what's a coach?
coaching?
I was like, a football coach, a hockey coach, what?
Yes, exactly.
Those are sports references I just made there.
Beautiful. Well done.
Thank you.
I'm rubbing off on you. Pretty soon I'll be doing Grateful Dead, I'm sure.
Yes, you will.
Maybe. Jerry Garcia. What about your business? Tell us about your business.
Yeah, so Hemmings House, this particular iteration of my career in filmmaking is a film production company that services the storytelling needs of other companies, other organizations, We also make a whole bunch of original content for television, documentaries and whatnot, but everything with the spirit of helping companies that really value their companies as a force for good, helping them succeed through telling really important stories that matter to their customer base. And for original content, we produce stories that accelerate movements and make positive change in the world. And it's been an interesting process building this in the last 10 years and finding our place, Dave. Like, I've been watching you rise up to the top of your market as the go-to resource for coaching, for executive coaching. And you've mentioned the same thing about me, seeing where we've gone, and our tie together, you and I, is our weekly podcast, the Bowling Point Podcast, which we're on right now.
And there's another tie. We both use each other's services.
I've hired you, you've hired me.
Exactly. But when we started, tell me a little bit about the marketing budget you had.
Marketing budget? My credit card, i.e., there was no marketing budget.
Yeah.
And I would say most small businesses and entrepreneurs, they struggle with this because I hate to admit and acknowledge that you need money to make money, because I've tried to fight against that philosophy for so long. But you need marketing dollars if you want to be heard, right? You got to throw a ton of money. And some retail companies are like, you got to put 15 to 30% of your target revenues into marketing.
Right.
So I don't have. How do you do that from zero? Right. Where do you start?
30% of zero is
absolutely zero,
right.
And that's where I was. So I think in a scrappy way, you and I both realized to grow our businesses, we need to stand out, and we need to stand out by giving value as with our gifts as much as we possibly can out in the world.
Yes.
And do you want to expand on that at all about how you've done the same thing, or are we just acknowledging that we've both done that?
I think anyone listening to this will agree. If you have a business, a service, a product, something that you're out there in the market, in your market, whatever that market is, trying to be heard, you're probably doing it because you have a lot of passion. So we both had a lot of passion for our unique businesses and the sectors that we came from or were involved in or trying to build. The challenge is that if you don't have a budget, if you don't have a lot of money, because that's where people get hung up, right?
Totally.
Or they'll say, I can't hire someone to a full-time person to run my marketing, my communications, okay? And I think what we're saying is that's okay. Actually, I don't think we are saying that's okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, we know exactly what you mean because we both started there.
That's right.
And over a decade later, we have become. And by the way, we should say this. I think we're both a little uncomfortable talking about being thought leaders in our marketplace, but we're also trying to own that.
The other thing that's tough to acknowledge as the type of entrepreneurs that you and I are is the fact that we have found a lot of success in the last decade. We've sold millions of dollars of videos. You've sold millions of dollars of coaching exchanges. Like, this stuff works. The funny thing is we didn't know what we were doing while we were doing it.
But it felt right.
Felt right.
And then, like Steve Jobs says, you can connect the dots looking backwards.
And, 2020 hindsight, that whole saying is so true. As we look back, you and I have followed a process that's identical, probably because we've influenced each other over the years, and here we are. And
so we want to teach people that process. We want to talk about, and I think what we want to also get into is really when we're saying thought leader, what do we mean by that?
Exactly.
And what's important about that? And the other thing is, and when we're talking about market, well, what do we mean by that? So why don't we go into that a little bit? Do you think that's a natural segue?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, with all our scripting and with all the work we've done to really refine our messaging here on this particular point.
Even before we do that, you and I did discuss a few of the problems that we have all had in our heads. For example, we put in quotes here on our computers. We said, the opportunity is for those who have a great product and service and a story, but can't seem to be heard in a very noisy world. That's why we wanted to build it. But that's us. That was us.
That
still is us.
Exactly.
Because when we think about the greatest frustration is when we know we've got something that's great for the world, our product or service, and we know it is the best in the world, perhaps, in as humble a way as possible, but nobody is hearing us. Like, nobody knows we exist. That's frustrating for an entrepreneur.
And when we talk to our clients, there's nothing more frustrating than when you've got like Greg said, this great service. You've got raving fans, and it just seems like, why doesn't the rest of the world know? Why doesn't the rest of the market know? And we believe there's a way to help the broader market know and think about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next video, related to some of the success we've had and how this actually has translated into creating opportunities for both our businesses.
Yeah, opportunities that are, like I'd say 85-90% of our sales comes as a result of this. So going back to your earlier point, Dave, about what is a thought leader, some people may never even heard that term before. Like it comes. Entrepreneurs, we all have the tendency to speak a lot of jargony things, but thought leader, it'd be cool for both of us to kind of give our own definitions. Do you want to start? Because I've got a very specific definition.
Yeah, well, to me, I think it really, one of the ways to describe it is that you have credibility. And so when someone comes to your website, comes to hear you speak, comes to, or is in a meeting with you, you have credibility because you've built credibility. And what I'm gonna lean on something I learned from Stephen Covey, and this idea that credibility, it really has two components, right? And one being integrity. Okay, so they believe that you're gonna follow through and do what you say you're gonna do, and you're going to deliver your business in good faith. And the other piece is that you're competent. You know your craft. You have the ability to deliver, and you have an expertise, and you have a domain of knowledge and expertise that can support that whatever your service is. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for me, thought leader has those two components that lead to you being credible. And what happens when you're credible is that people can get now to, how can I work with you?
Exactly.
So they're not getting stuck on, okay, Greg's a really nice guy. I think he's a wonderful human being. I believe in his integrity, but can he really make a film? Well, can he really help me tell a story? So, or the other is, he's awesome at his craft, but do I trust him to, or in my case as a coach, do I trust this person to be confidential? Do I trust that he's a good person? This is a safe place. And do I trust that they have the ability to support me?
And the other part that I was going to say too is, once you have been able to gain a position of thought leadership, you don't really have to prove yourself much anymore. The pull marketing that we talk about, not the push, but the pull, starts to happen. Right. When people start trusting you, even people that do not have any evidence that you can deliver, but they've heard you enough times and and have experienced social proof from other people talking about you in the market, or hearing you in the market talk about something that has value, then there's the pipeline. The pipeline becomes a lot smoother, and the sales cycle becomes a lot shorter. And that's why this stuff is so important, because you can pay for this through a large marketing budget. You can do that. But if you don't have the budgets, why not follow the bowling point process, the 4-point process, and not spend as much money, hardly spend any money at all, but put a little bit of effort into giving value into the community, helping people, giving away some of your gifts for free, creating a reputation, getting yourself out there, and then seeing opportunities come to you. And I think that's a dream of most entrepreneurs that we've spoken to on the Boiling Point anyhow.
Absolutely. And it's actually helped us refine the process when you think of some of the people we've talked to and what they've shared with us. It's been really, it's affirming, and it validates a lot. So that's what we mean by thought leader. And, and are you a thought leader? And if you are, fabulous. You recognize that it doesn't come easy. And the other thing about this, there's no magic bullet, in my opinion. I think we're on the same page.
100%.
It takes some discipline. And it takes some creativity. The last piece I want to talk about thought leadership is, it's also about showing up authentically. And part of why you're going to see, as you watch this video, and for those of you, I know the millions of you that have listened to our podcast, people will say, well, there's this free flow to it. There's this way that you guys approach it, which seems really you.
Some people might think it's just really lazy podcasters, but no. It's strategic.
Totally. 100%. But what feels good about it for me is I feel like I'm being authentic. And to me, that's part of your thought leadership, is in part of your credibility is connected to being authentic. So I think that's something that's really important to us and has been a component of what's helped us.
Your brand can be completely destroyed in a second as soon as you are unauthentic and you get busted. Right? It's like it's so critical.
Or inauthentic.
Inauthentic. Or how about this? Irregardless. Irregardless, Dave. So this stuff is critical stuff.
Yeah.
Whether you're trying to build thought leadership or not, integrity, authenticity are the truly the foundations of thought leadership, but also the foundations of success.
And there's ways to become a thought leader that exist for everyone in every market. So let's talk a little bit about market.
Let's talk about market. And also, at the bottom of this, if you're consuming this on our Boiling Point podcast as audio, please do leave comments. We really do want to know how you show up in your market as a thought leader. Okay,
Absolutely.
so that's what you do right now. Press pause if you want and do that. We want to hear how everybody is showing up, even if you're not there yet, but how are you going to show up if you haven't already as a thought leader? Now, going to market, what do we mean by market, Dave? Because when I hear people say, you got to be the best in the world, the best in the market, I'm like, that's intimidating, because there's no way I'm going to put my hand up and say, I am the best filmmaker, the best entrepreneur in the world. Like, number one, it's not true. And number two, like who am I to say? So what do we mean by market when we say you really have to be the thought leader in your market? Is it as intimidating as that sounds?
I don't think so. I think there's a way to define it. For us, in terms of from a coaching perspective, we've identified a geographical region that we call our market. It doesn't mean we can't spill over into a bigger market, okay, in terms of our thought leadership. We recognize when we're on the edges of that geographical marketplace that that we don't have the same credibility just because we haven't got that far. So it's important to recognize that. So, but it doesn't mean it can't spill over. And I think the other is what segment of the market. So like you take coaching, and then people have heard of coaching, and a lot of people come up and say, they'll say, you're a life coach. And I'll say, no, actually, I'm a business coach. And Vision Coaching has a number of business coaches or leadership coaches, because we're starting to define our kind of niche down to our segment, where and we offer to small businesses, and we also offer our services to corporations, and within those segments, we even niche it down further. We actually like to talk to HR leaders in the corporate segment that are responsible for people development, leadership development. So you can start seeing how it kind of niches down and down and down. So that's what I would describe as a way of looking at a market. What about you?
So for me, I really was intimidated when I was starting the company, saying, like, because do you remember, Dave? I used to go to France all the time, to MIPCOM and BAMF, and I went to all these big industry events to try to be heard and try to pitch to big broadcasters, and there was thousands of me, like literally thousands. Sometimes, like at MIPCOM, there might be 10,000 film producers.
Wow!
All after the same money, Right. And I was like, it was disheartening in a way, because I was like, how do I compete in this market? But then I started to realize, it's like, maybe that's not the market I need to compete in. Like, it's still good to play in that market,
right?
But is that my measure of success or failure, if I make a lot of money in that market or not? I took that burden off my shoulders quite some time ago. I started to realize that our market is niched down to, let's just talk about the commercial market first. For Hemmings House, as filmmakers, we want to work with companies that we believe in, with other entrepreneurs who are doing great things in the world, entrepreneurs that believe that their companies are a force for good, especially B Corps, especially social venture network owners, all these people who care about the triple bottom line.
Right.
That's a little bit of a smaller world now, that market.
So what's interesting about that isn't defined geographically.
That's not geographic at all.
Yeah.
It's a community. It's a global community of business owners.
Right.
Now, do we get all of our work from that sector? No. But if I'm looking at being the best, or the thought leader, the most influential thought leader in my market, I am starting to look at that as the environment that I want to invest my time in. Right. So as that gets whittled down, then we look at different size companies in that area who can afford a $40,000 video or story, as an example, right? What are the companies that we really want to help support with smaller videos, so we have a lifelong relationship with? And it goes down to relationship, because I just took a funnel from tens of thousands of producers and buyers at MIPCOM, now down to a smaller community, now down to individual friendships and relationships. So that's now my market, super small. And yes, I can be the thought leader of that market. And man, it feels good when you realize that you actually are the thought leader of that market.
Anyone listening to this right now or watching this right now is going to, I think, start to see, particularly if they're familiar with our podcasts and have listened to a number of them, will see how you've done a brilliant job of that.
Oh, thanks, Dave.
No,
Yeah.
like seriously, like you've introduced that whole audience to me in terms of B Corps, that community, that market, and as they go through the 4 steps or points in our process, what they'll do is they'll recognize that they'll see how you've been doing that specifically. So I'm really glad you used that example. So we've talked about a challenge. I'd rather define it as a challenge than a problem that a lot of people, including us, face, right? How do you be heard? How do you become a thought leader? We've talked about what it means to be a thought leader. Talked a little bit, and we've just kind of just touched on where we started. The one point I wanted to make here that we didn't talk about earlier is that we both began with a passion for what we're doing. There was no map. There was no, here are the steps too.
Right.
Here are make sure you follow this map. So it's not a franchise we bought.
That's right.
So there was a lot of learning,
a lot of mistakes.
Mistakes, and this is, and then as we support other people and we share these steps, it can become clear. So I'd rather people learn from our mistakes, from our trial and error, from what's worked well for us. And so you're sitting back, and you're listening to saying, okay, great. So what is it? So I know the why. I know, why my challenge. I know, what it means to be a thought leader, but how?
But how? And you know what, Dave? That's the question I get more than anything else out on the street, mostly in the entrepreneur space. But everybody says, how do you do this? I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but I get this question a couple times a week. How do you do this? You're everywhere. I'm not everywhere at all. But there's an illusion
you do feel like
that people like you and I are everywhere because they read you in the paper. They see me on an interview on TV. All these different things that we're going to be going into in the next episodes of the Boiling Point process.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about this. In a way, it is a great way to give back as well, because like you said, there was no playbook when we did it. And you and I are consistently mentoring and coaching people anyhow. And I think through our experience, it's a really fun way for us to recount our stories, our wins, our fails, in a way that is going to help our business community and our listeners become stronger entrepreneurs themselves.
Absolutely. So in the next video, join us. We're going to get into a bit of the how. And in terms of leaving comments, Greg asked you to leave some comments, but we'd also be curious about how relevant is this to you? This is what we're talking about, and what is the most relevant? What are some of the challenges you're up against, in terms of being heard in your marketplace? So share below. I believe it's below.
Yeah, it's below, and take this as an opportunity to introduce yourself too. Let us know what your company is, what your business, who you are. Just do a quick couple sentences. Hey, I'm so and so. This is what I do. This is what I've found that's worked, and what I have found that hasn't worked. Or maybe you've got a question for Dave and I as well. Slam her in there, and that's going to help us design the next episode. So we really appreciate your engagement on all of these and these modules, and hope this has been a really fruitful learning experience for you. I know Dave and I are very excited to finally, after so many episodes of talking about this, to finally have the opportunity to start sharing some of these tips and tricks. In a way, maybe this will be helpful for those people who continue to ask us how we do it. We might just say, hey, just watch the episodes.
Right. Love it. Okay. So we'll see you in the next video.
See you later. Is that how we usually close out Boiling Points?
We'll see you next week.
We usually do takeaways, but our takeaways are us, so I guess we don't have any.
I don't want to bore people with that.
Okay. See you next week, Dave.
See you, buddy. See you next video.